Hello and welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. My name is Brianna and that is Courtney.
Hello.
Before we get started, we always want to remind you of a few things that are in our description and show notes. First of all, you'll find links to our social media if you want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We always put new episode updates on.
And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle.
It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online.
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
And learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.
There and a ton of memes. If you want to check that out, the links are in our show notes. We also have links to resources for victims if you're interested in finding suicide prevention hotlines, anti-bullying stuff, 12-step, a bunch of other stuff like that. And we have links to the resources that we used for research. So if you want to do a little bit more reading on the story this week and get some more information, you can check those out. And the last thing we have is links to our Patreon and our Threadless. So if you want small merch items and bonus episodes, check out our Patreon. And if you want some bigger items like t-shirts, phone cases, stuff like that, we have that on Threadless. And I think that's pretty much it that you're going to find in our description each week, so we can get to our story. So this is the beginning of season 2. We're back to letter A and we're starting our alphabet all over again. So we're doing adultery for letter A this time.
It's a topic we have a lot to choose from.
Yes. There's so many cases where adultery is the motivation. For sure. Most.
I mean, most.
It's a huge percentage. But I think we've chosen some good ones.
I agree.
Some gnarly, crazy ones. The first one we're doing is Betty Broderick this week.
This is one of my, I hate to say favorites.
Right? Like you can't say that when they're murders.
But you can't look away from the train wreck.
Yes. This
so
one's really a crazy story. And just fair warning, it's probably going to be 2 parts because we've got a lot of research on this and a lot of information to go through.
I think that is fair.
But there's so much, like you can't really skip over any of it because there's so many things that led up to this murder.
This is so complex and is one of the cases that in California, divorce law and even murder, San Diego specifically, murder trials, this is the story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is a huge one.
It made its way to LA even.
Right.
I mean, it was everywhere.
Yeah, definitely a huge case. So it's heavy. There's a lot to go through. And you really can't skip it. Otherwise, it's not really doing justice to the whole case and what happened to these people.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I mean, their words are just, they tell the story in this one.
Yeah. And we are going to play some clips and stuff so that you can hear things in people's own words and kind of hear the people actually directly involved talk about a few things.
Absolutely.
So, you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Let's dive in. It's a big one. So, Elizabeth was the third of 6 children born in New York to Rita and Frank Basseglia in November 1947. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's Italian, so I figure, yeah, it's probably Basseglia.
Her father owned a plaster business. Her childhood was centered in all ways around the Catholic Church. Big Catholic family. Betty told reporters that she was raised with designer clothing, trips to country clubs, fancy cars, and a maid. They were definitely well off.
From all things you can tell, definitely. I don't know how, really, but all the reporters, everything Betty ever said was country clubs, fancy cars, the maid.
Yeah.
Which implies
that they were doing pretty well.
Pretty well.
So she was from a really hardworking family. They were devout Catholics from Eastchester, New York, who always sent her to Catholic schools and, had her with the very best, the finest things in life. Everyone called her Betty and focused on instilling in her family values, hardworking values, and really a drive to seek a good education. And this worked because later we'll see that she kind of pursued that on her own, that she really went far with her education, especially for the time.
Betty definitely seemed to appreciate education and all things with it. The Greek system in college.
Right. Very involved.
Yeah. And like after school stuff, cheerleading, she did it all.
All the extracurriculars, for sure. Betty was thin, beautiful, and very stylish, very well dressed. People that met her for the first time were really instantly charmed by her very bubbly kind of personality, and she had a great sense of humor. So she really made friends very easily. After completing high school, she went to a small private Catholic university called Mount St. Vincent, after which she half-heartedly planned to become a teacher.
I don't really like that part because I would like my teachers
To really want it?
Wholeheartedly, in fact, involved in their teaching credential.
To be pretty invested in it, yeah. But it seemed like she had some other priorities, you know?
Oh, yeah.
In reality, the norm for the era was that, of course, women were to focus more on finding a husband than becoming a career woman, and Betty was no exception. Her family had once encouraged her to maintain really good grades and focus on her studies, but now all of a sudden they were asking her more and more questions about her social life, her dating life, etc., more so than her education.
She's probably got older brothers and sisters at this point because she's the third of 6 that are married and they're out. Now, her parents probably just like, all right, you're next. How do we get you out of here?
Right.
Stop looking at grades. You're pretty.
Right.
We don't need that for you.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that's what they told her. It's crazy.
Start looking at, branching out.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah. But like any teenage girl, she was also a little boy crazy. So her attention really shifted with, her own interests and also with, her family kind of changing.
So this encouragement is going to work perfectly then.
Right. This is definitely going to turn out well.
We're good to go.
In 1965, when she was 18, she was given permission by her parents to go to Indiana to attend a USC Notre Dame football game. While on the trip with her friends, Betty met a Notre Dame med student from Pittsburgh named Daniel Thomas Broderick III.
It's quite a name.
I know. Yeah, the third. Dan was really intelligent. He was an intellectual, but also he was really charismatic and had a great sense of humor like Betty. So he wasn't just super studious and such. He was actually, really charming.
It was probably good banter for like a native Pittsburgh, a New Yorker.
Right.
Probably went back and forth a lot.
Yeah.
From what we can tell, especially later, like Betty's got away with words.
Definite wordsmith. So image was very important to Dan, who always wore designer clothes, tailored suits, and it earned him the nickname Dapper Dan.
So good.
When they actually met, he gave her his business card, and it said Dan Broderick III, MDA. And when she asked what MDA stood for, he said the A stands for almost, as in almost a doctor, which she found very charming.
So this is interesting because we've all met this guy.
Yeah.
We know this guy.
Oh, yeah. Right away, I would have been like, bye.
Well, what's funny
is... It would have
is
annoyed the shit out of me.
The problem here is Betty fell for it. Betty went for it. And Betty is the kind of chick these guys are looking for.
Right. That's the numbers game they're playing. There's going to be a Betty at every club.
If you lay down enough, right? Eventually, you're going to pick one thing up. So it's a numbers game here. And Betty, it just worked out.
Right.
She fell for it. MDA almost. Good God.
So they bonded over many similarities they had, many of which came from their Catholic upbringing that they both shared.
Makes perfect sense. They don't have to explain all these weird services that are 8 hours long. I mean,
stand up, sit down.
Yeah, because
kneel.
Coming from that background, it's totally normal to you. But other people that aren't involved are probably going to be a little more like, what's this about? Especially if they're as devout as they claim to be, or they seem to have been.
And also like the value system, the family, the especially large families,
Absolutely.
There's certain things that are just given when you grow up with that many siblings,
Definitely.
After the first night that they met, Betty had heard that Dan actually told his friends that she was the woman he was going to marry.
She fell for it.
Oh, yeah.
The first one that fell for it, probably. And he's
Right.
like, oh my God, I got to hold on to this one.
That's
That's the one.
Can't let this one go.
Bets.
So Betty liked Dan, but for him, it was clearly love at first sight. I think for her, it had to grow a little bit.
She might have seen some of this she might have been like, all right, yeah, that was the guy that gave me the card.
Right.
He's cool. And then he's
going to have to work for it.
And so then it's like, this is a layup.
Right?
I got this one. All right. My parents want me out of the house. He's here. He's in med school. Let's go with it.
Right. Yeah. He had recently been accepted to med school at Cornell, and although he was really focused on chasing success, he began actually putting a lot of his energy into pursuing Betty. Although they were really far from each other, they both knew that Dan would really soon be moving to Cornell, so the long distance really wouldn't have to be permanent. It wasn't a forever thing.
I want to know, did he tell everyone, I went to Cornell? Are you aware that I went to Cornell? Because I went to Cornell. That's all I want to know. Was he in an a cappella group?
Right. I feel like that's a stereotype that we've seen in The Office, but I actually know that person in real life. You know what I mean? Like, if you know someone that went to Cornell, it's true. Like, that is based on something.
Daniel Thomas Broderick III.
Right.
Is what they based the character in The Office after, I believe, is what I read. Allegedly.
Allegedly. We cannot confirm nor deny.
True.
So Betty was used to attention from boys, but she kind of thought this one was special. He was really romantic. He was very attentive to Betty, and she was really won over by the fact that he treated her so well and pursued her so intensely. I think other guys, in my opinion, probably were like, oh, she's pretty. They would try, and then they would give up. And he was the one that was just like, I'm going to turn on the charm to 11 and really romance her.
It's exciting.
Yes.
You're young.
Yeah.
You know nothing else.
Right?
What are you going to compare it to? Your 18?
She's like, this is never going to happen again. When really it's like, yeah, it will.
Yeah, it will.
Even though he was a bit more dorky than her normal type, she was really glad that she gave him a chance. She knew that basically dating Dan meant that they could have a good life together, and she could become that kind of middle-class wife and mother that she wanted to be and her family was pushing her to be. After they were living closer together, they got engaged. Dan wanted to walk down the aisle pretty much immediately, but Betty wanted to finish college first since she was still really just a teenager at the time.
Very responsible.
Yeah. She had never lived alone before she married Dan, only with her parents. So this is really like her first everything, her first love, her first living together, the whole nine. They were married on April 12th, 1969, in a big church wedding, and they had a honeymoon in the Caribbean. When they got back from their honeymoon, Betty found out she was pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were living in Dan's dorm at the time, and they were really broke since he couldn't work while in med school. Betty says, we literally had nothing, not a single diaper or shirt, and nowhere to put the baby down. Dan says that as early as 2 weeks after their wedding, Betty began asking for a divorce.
That's strange to me. Like,
isn't it weird?
I imagine maybe she's just thrown in and now
she's like, what did I get myself
overwhelmed
into? Totally in over her head.
And she's been really taken care of.
Yes.
So now she has to take care of her husband, especially because she's a devout Catholic Italian wife now. She's not just a single woman. She's a wife. So it's all about her husband.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think this was probably a really hard reality check for her. And maybe the divorce had more to do with not being fully an adult, not being independent enough, something. But it just started really early that she would.
Yeah.
That's very early. Soon. You should really still be on some sort of pink cloud, you know?
Sort.
Yeah. He says that he was really shocked by this. And even though she actually asked him repeatedly for a divorce, she really wouldn't give him a reason why.
I don't think she had a reason. I think she was just overwhelmed and this is my out. I need to divorce him and then I can leave.
Mm-hmm. She just told him that if he didn't know what he had done wrong, then he needed to figure it out.
This sounds like I think it's funny that, right? Beginning to every romantic relationships argument, not even romantic, just that's how it starts. I was going to walk out of this room, but now that you scoffed or made some noise under your breath, I'll be right here asking you, what did you mean when you said,
right.
I see how this happened.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Like, he just should have known better. He should know. Yeah, that's crazy.
He was probably seeing some colors.
Oh, is that it? Dan says that throughout their marriage, she would threaten divorce literally hundreds of times. And after the first few times, he basically stopped taking it seriously, which I think kind of anyone would.
I think that's what people did with Betty.
Right. Just in general. I think this is kind of the hallmark of her relationships, all of her friendships, everything.
Her making these wild claims and wild and out, phrasing and just saying insane stuff. And, that's just Betty.
Right. People dismissed it, thought it would just blow
didn't start
over.
with Dan, but this is a very clear example.
Betty became a third-grade teacher to support their new family. And between semesters, she would nanny other children and get part-time jobs to ensure they had steady money coming in.
She's a hard worker.
Yes. She's a hustler.
That's all that.
And she had to be. She had no choice. She was the breadwinner. So their daughter Kimberly was born in 1970. And 1 year later, they had a daughter named Kathy Lee. Betty thought that their hardships were basically over when Dan finished med school. So she was pretty shocked when Dan suddenly announced that he wanted to go to Harvard Law School afterwards.
Of course, right?
Right.
Harvard.
Of course. Dan said that if he went to law school, he could use both his degrees to specialize in medical malpractice law, which would make him really highly sought after and very successful. Yeah. It was basically a means to an end where he just wanted to go to the top.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's the groundwork for ultimately what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. It's pretty smart on his part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Betty just has to get another job.
Right.
But don't worry, she'll do that.
Exactly. That's the thing. It was kind of taken for granted that she would go along with it.
Always. But
he was right. She did.
Yep.
Betty agreed to continue to support the family with her multiple jobs while Dan continued his education and went to Harvard Law School. And that was it. Betty also began selling Tupperware and Avon to make extra money on top of her regular jobs.
This is pretty interesting because as soon as I read it, in my whole world right then, it was just smelling Skin So Soft.
Right.
Avon Skin So Soft. I can smell it now. And I can see the harvest gold and avocado green Tupperware.
Right.
Absolutely. I just think, she does what she's got to do.
Yeah.
She's got kids now. Well, coming kids. She's got to do it. And he wants to go to Harvard, so Dan's going to Harvard.
And she's just going to make it work.
Yeah.
No matter what.
And she
even if the house smells nasty like Skin So Soft.
She's teaching, nannying, taking on odds and ends, selling Avon, selling Tupperware.
Selling anything she
selling
can.
Anything.
Yeah. She definitely stepped it up every time. Yeah. Anytime that Dan couldn't be there for something, Betty basically stepped in. All the parenting stuff, all the household stuff. Whether she supported the family financially so he could go to school, taking care of the kids, anything around the house, the attitude was always, don't worry, because Betty can always fix it and take care of it.
Thanks, Dan.
Right. In 1974, Dan finally graduated, and they decided to move to San Diego, California. They thought there would be more opportunity there, plus they loved the weather, the beaches, and of course it was kind of an upscale area, and that's where they wanted to be.
Yeah.
So they rented a bungalow first in Claremont. Dan got a job at a prestigious law firm, Gray, Carey, Ames, and Fry, but he didn't really make enough money to support the whole family, so Betty had to continue working. She got part-time jobs as a hostess at Black Angus and then the Jolly Roger restaurant. Dan would work during the day and then he would come home to look after the kids while Betty went to work at night.
That's a rough schedule.
It is, and you never see each other. There's no time to really be in your relationship.
The ships in the night.
Yeah. But after only a short while, Dan's caseload was really too demanding, so they had to hire a babysitter to watch the kids between when Betty left for work and when Dan got home. So then not only are they passing in the night, they're like not even seeing each other.
Not at all.
Betty tried to increase her income by teaching classes at a local school, mostly religious classes, and she then got her real estate license to help supplement the income even further while Dan was kind of building his career.
I don't know when she finds the time.
I have no idea. I mean, I think I'm a hustler. I've got a lot going on, but this is crazy.
Not
I can't
only
even fathom.
to get the license, but then you're going to have to show houses. You're going to have to do,
Mm-hmm.
all these things. She's got a great personality for it, but like, how do you find the time? And you got kids now. I mean, you just hire babysitters at this point is what they're up to.
Yeah. But then it's like you're just working to pay for babysitters.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. It's a lot for her. One night while both Dan and Betty were at work, an electrical fire started behind their living room TV. And thankfully, the babysitter was able to get the kids out in time and nobody was hurt. But the entire house was burnt down and all of their belongings were gone. It's crazy.
That's not good.
And I can't even imagine the kind of regret that sets in when you're not there home with your children going through something like this, you know?
You probably don't hire a babysitter anymore.
Yeah. So they moved to an apartment while Dan worked with the insurance company to get reimbursed for their loss and their damages. Living in the close quarters of a really small apartment put a pretty big strain on Betty and Dan's relationship. But after a few months, they bought a house in La Jolla using the insurance money. It was a really great neighborhood in an upper middle class part of San Diego. Betty became a full-time homemaker and put all her energy into interior decorating between caring for the kids. And Dan, on the other hand, focused all his energy into his legal career. And he often worked these long 16, 13-hour days pretty consistently.
So at this point, Betty gets to just, be a housewife, which is what she seems to have wanted to do.
Right.
She still has her decorating and everything. And I mean, how do they find the time? They never even see each other. It's just,
Yeah, in hindsight, you can just look at their relationship deteriorating.
she's asking for divorce 2 weeks into this marriage.
Right.
I don't think this is good for the relationship. Although now they're living on the beach in La Jolla,
Yeah.
surf town, really cute area anyway. And at this point, there's nothing but just beautiful, pristine beaches. And
It's easy to be distracted from
It's
the
very-
fact that
I
your
think it's very
relationship is
easy.
crumbling.
I imagine it's simple.
Yeah. Yeah. So since the fire, they had decided not to leave the kids with a sitter. So to bring in extra money, Betty started a daycare out of their new house.
So instead, they're just calling the babysitter mom. That's what happened here.
And she's just, continuing to be resourceful.
She's
too.
already taking care of kids.
She's like, I can make this work. I got this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the strain of the fire, the small apartment, and moving was still creating a pretty big distance between Dan and Betty. So she persuaded him to go to a couples retreat to work on their relationship. Betty felt very isolated and deprioritized by Dan's focus on his career, and she was upset that sometimes, even when he was home, he was really distracted by work anyway.
That doesn't surprise me in any way. That's all he
Right.
does.
Yeah, that's his entire life.
It's the only way he's going to get what he wants in the end is what he does now.
Right.
He's thinking, I'm building this for us, Bets,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just leaving you
Right.
alone all the time with these kids.
So he was neglectful, and she asked that he start spending more quality time with her and the kids without any distractions. During the couples retreat, they each wrote letters to each other about what they were unhappy with and the things that they wanted to improve. Dan's letter acknowledged that he had been an absentee father and an inattentive husband, but said that he had to get more successful so that he could earn basically the freedom and independence to put more time into his family, that there was basically an end goal. Betty's letter expressed her loneliness and requested that he be more romantic and spend more time with her.
That's what she fell in love with. Remember how romantic he was?
And it was probably just this huge disparity between the man she married and the man she was with.
He's
eventually.
too busy to be romantic.
Right. They both acknowledged that they weren't happy in the marriage, but they agreed to put more work into it so they could get back to where they used to be. About a year later, their first son, Daniel Broderick IV, was born.
These names.
I know.
So good. I was hoping for a Matthew.
Right?
But you can't have everything. We've already got one.
Right. One's enough.
One is probably enough.
By all accounts, Betty was a really caring and fun mother. She spent all her time with the kids and was always up to some fun activity or off on an adventure with her own kids and also with those children that she watched with the daycare. But while Betty was putting all her time and energy into the family, Dan was getting more consumed by work with each passing day. So even though they had talked about it in the retreat, nothing had changed. And now not only was he spending time working on cases, but he also had a growing social life. He said that he was expected to basically wine and dine these clients and attend various events where there were important members of the legal field socializing with him. But, of course, Betty felt really left behind. And she thought that she had also worked really hard to help him get where he was. So now she just had to watch him enjoy all the benefits alone.
This is absolutely where it starts.
Yeah.
With the injustice of feeling like you're being a little used. You're feeling like, I did this on my blood, sweat, and tears, my back.
Mm-hmm.
Who the hell was watching all these fucking kids?
Right.
It was Betty. I didn't even want to get a teaching credential. I half-heartedly taught 3rd grade.
Right.
I didn't want to do that, Dan.
Yeah.
Dapper Dan gets to go out and talk to all these people, all the Tony La Jolla folk.
Right.
Socialize and come home, and Betty's just like, there's fucking laundry and this, that. But, she also really did enjoy being a mom.
Yes.
So he
absolutely.
probably is like, she likes it.
Right. She's
It's
getting
cool.
what she wants to. She
How's
enjoys
Betty?
her life.
She
She's a
loves it.
housewife. But in all actuality, it was just this growing, distance between them.
And it
she
starts
was
with,
resentful about it.
Going to dinners. Oh, I got a
Mhm.
long meeting. And then
Right.
he's just going to give him an inch, take a mile kind of person.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's just going to become 24-hour days. Betty, I got a 36-hour shift.
Right?
I mean, it's just going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, absolutely. By the late 70s, Dan was making 6 figures, building a pretty good reputation, and he was even getting some notoriety publicly. He represented one of the victims' families who was shot by Brenda Spencer. And we know Brenda Spencer from one of the original school shooters. She was the I Don't Like Mondays lady.
Sir Bob Geldof
Yeah.
was inspired by that shooting to write the song I Don't Like Mondays.
So one case he won awarded a girl $1.25 million after being sexually molested by her father. So he was getting some pretty big, high-profile cases,
He's
for sure.
winning lots of money in these cases.
Yep.
He's getting a lot of notice in San Diego law.
And then probably more and more clients, more and more workload, more and
Of
more
course.
hours. With Dan's success, Betty was spending a lot of money doing various things, first of all, around the house. The kids were able to attend private school. They built a pool at the house. The couple went on to acquire multiple San Diego properties and a 2-bedroom ski condo in Vail, Colorado. But Betty began also spending pretty frivolously on her own things, and it became a new source of fights between the couple. Dan would tell her that they couldn't afford to spend as much money as they were, but Betty would continue to do so, either, I think, for attention or maybe just anger and resentment.
Or it went something like this. Yo, Bets. Wait, no, I'm sorry.
That's the best impression.
Hey, Betty, you're spending a little frivolously.
Right.
What do you mean, Dan? I don't know what you're talking about. Dan, this is not frivolous. I worked my ass off all this time to make you a success. This money's half mine. This money's more than half mine because I put all these years in. This is Betty. This
If you've
is what
never
you
heard
hear.
Betty speak, Courtney just did the best Betty impression you will ever hear.
I just don't know, Dan. Like,
She's
I
so
can hear
high-pitched.
I can just hear it.
What she reminds me of, though, is like she's a cross between Annette Bening in American Beauty and like the Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian baby voice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
You know what else? It's also kind of, It's kind of, I don't know if you ever saw the show. It was called Pretty Wild on E, and the mom was like new age weirdo.
Oh my God, with the two
Secret,
daughters?
the two daughters. And she's a cool mom. She's not a weird, she's a cool mom. And like Mean Girls cool mom thing.
Oh my God, I haven't thought about it in
that
so
is
long.
the voice. And
that
across
is the
with the
voice.
Annette Bening. Absolutely Annette Bening from
Yeah.
American Beauty. I mean, to the real estate.
Yep, everything.
To the clothes. All of it.
Betty reminds me so much of that character.
100%.
Yeah, so
I just
crazy.
don't know, Dan. I can just hear it. I'm going to spend this money.
It's so crazy. It's just this high pitch kind of baby voice.
Squawk.
But very squawky. She's a
Very
fast
squawky.
talker. She's a lot.
She's a lot.
When Dan bought himself a burgundy Corvette with 2 seats, that was clearly like not a family car. Betty was livid. And she basically decided if he could buy selfish things, then she could too. Dan would tell her that she was living beyond their means, but Betty would continue spending money and updating her wardrobe and improving her appearance.
Betty said later that her wardrobe, she was like, I have shirts that cost $3,000. This isn't a lot of money to me, right? But with the Corvette and stuff, it's like, yeah, okay, that's a lot of fucking money.
Yeah.
On a 2-seater car, you cannot really wine and dine clients even.
Right.
You would get some baller sedan, Rolls or something, right? Not some 2-seater.
Yeah. It was clearly a selfish
Cruise up and
purchase.
down the beach in your Ferrari. Well,
Right.
I'm sorry. That's just speculation. In this Corvette. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I had also read somewhere that it was a Jaguar, but I don't know. It was basically, we know it was a red sports car.
Of course it was.
Yeah.
What color was it going to be?
And, you and I have talked, like, this is definitely, Dan is the poster child for midlife crisis.
This is one of the first cases, too, where we really see that living out of, like, trading in your wife, the starter wife, trading her in for a younger model. He's got the red car. He's got the 2-seater, this and that. He has a nose job. He's got the clothes,
Right.
It's
He's
gross.
that guy.
Oh, he's that guy.
The same guy that we had talked about gives people business cards.
It's that guy.
Like,
He just is a little older now,
right.
looking for someone younger.
And this is what maturity brought him.
Scary.
So Betty always figured that if she was skinny and beautiful enough, that Dan would finally give her that attention that she craved. She spent excessively on diets, beauty treatments, a hairstylist, all sorts of stuff in hopes that she could basically lure him back with her looks.
She testified, I think, or she was in an interview saying that she had her teeth done, which to me, like, getting your teeth worked on, that's rough. Like, dentistry is awful.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
So to get your teeth done, and then why? Because I want Dan to love me. She would never
Right.
say that, but
that's what it was.
What the motivation was is she was like, this will bring him back.
Yeah.
Which, no.
We know how much men love teeth. That's like the number one thing.
There's the thing to get done, Betty. You should get your teeth done.
Yeah, it's just, but it really was, that's her motivation.
Totally.
I mean, she thought if she looked good enough, he would start giving her attention.
Bummer.
With Dan's growing reputation and his financial success, he decided that he could finally strike out on his own and start his own law firm.
This means he'll be home more, right?
Right, of course,
Okay.
in Betty's mind.
He's going to wake up and put the kids like in the car.
Right.
In the car seats, and he'll
Get them
pack
to
the lunches so
school.
that Betty can sleep in. And he'll
They'll
bring
be
her coffee.
hanging off the fender of
It'll
the
be
Corvette.
the dream relationship they've always thought they could have since she asked for a divorce 2 weeks in.
Right.
Sure.
But Betty was supportive and was eager to involve herself in his new business in whatever way she could. So she helped him first find an office. And of course, with her real estate and stuff like that, she was very involved in that process. And then she helped him decorate it to basically the standards of a really high-end law firm. It was a really nice office. And she must have felt that this would bring them closer together and that he would involve her more in the business. But of course, as we know, after the office was opened, he no longer needed her and just basically sent her back home.
So wait, are you telling me that he used her?
Right? Again, like this is the pattern. And of course, in her
Always.
mind, there's just this big case building up of like how he's
The
built his
injustice
success
of
on
it
her
all.
back.
Yeah.
Yes. Totally injustice. She feels betrayed and used
Absolutely.
once again.
And always talking about here, every time they talk about Betty's talent, it's always related to interior decorating, and that she would spend a lot on furniture and furnishings and window treatments and all this.
Yep.
But it was well done.
Right.
And people were just absolutely thrilled and willing to pay it.
Right.
And so this law firm was the flagship of Betty's interior decorating.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to, oh, Betty, you've done a great job. Keep working hard, girl. And then just like, fuck you, Betty, you're
Right.
out. She
Deuces.
can't even come in this building. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People come in, oh, this decoration is so amazing. Yeah, I did it myself. Like,
Right.
you can hear him saying, I'm almost a decorator.
Right.
Handing out interior decorating cards. And I'm a realtor, did I tell you? And I got oceanfront property in Utah to sell you.
Oh, absolutely.
Sounds like Dan.
That's a Dan thing to do.
Fucking
for
Dan.
sure.
Fucking Dan.
So in 1979, she gave birth to their son, Rhett, and resumed taking care of the kids and being at home. After Rhett's birth and the new office opened, Dan and Betty began fighting more often, and the fights seemed to escalate and be more vicious. Her daughter recalls that she would angrily talk to herself about all the things she resented Dan for while making dinner. And then by the time that Dan got home, Betty would be livid that the food she made had gotten cold. The kids recalled that their mother would scream and throw things at Dan while he usually just kind of sat there calmly waiting for Betty to get it all out and move on and calm down. When Dan wasn't able to keep his cool, he usually took his frustration out by smashing any nearby object, but never really directing his violence back at Betty. He once threw a fish tank over a balcony, and sometimes he destroyed electronics like stereos and TVs.
I would always, if I was the daughter, I'd be like, she's poisoning my dad right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, I'd
this
be
son of a
terrified.
bitch stirring along. This asshole, I fucking hate him. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Right? And then, like, here's your food. It's cold. Like, oh, it's just the
And full of arsenic.
growing up in that, the tension, just walking
So
on eggshells.
scary.
The room would vibrate
Mhm.
around her, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Absolutely. Kim thought that if her mother wasn't in such a bad mood all the time, that her father might want to spend more time at home. But they also felt like if their dad spent more quality time with them, then their mother really wouldn't have these outbursts all the time.
Very good observation.
Right?
On the part of the daughter.
Betty's method of battling for her husband's attention was actually pushing him away and driving more distance between them. Betty would also inappropriately complain to her children and put them in the middle and say awful things about their father. She also started having these really frequent dramatic conversations where she would like sit all the kids down and tell them that her and Dan were getting a divorce, and then asking each child one by one who they wanted to live with.
Wow.
I can't even imagine going through that kind of instability. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
It's unbelievable that this happened, that she did this. And like, I know it happens all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It happens all the time. They know that none of this shit's true.
I don't know. I mean, I think that when you're like maybe the older kids, but I think when you're little, you just kind of take your parents' word for it. So then you're sitting there like, my dad's a monster, but then I'm watching my mom be a monster.
You've seen him break stuff too.
Right,
So it's
right.
like, okay, he has his moments, but the common thread here is Betty freaking out.
But they're probably scared of both of them because their mom is saying such crazy things, but then they're watching their mom do crazy things.
I would be completely terrified of Betty and like life
Yeah.
that is going on.
By the time that Dan arrived home and all the kids, they would be crying, they would be devastated, and he would have to calm everyone down and reassure them that they weren't getting a divorce and basically fix everything. Betty would also frequently lock Dan out of the house, and then he would be outside throwing rocks at the window and trying to get the kids to let him in. And the children, of course, were once again in the middle, knowing that they should let him in. That's their dad. But if they did, then of course, Betty, their mom, would just be furious with them.
It's just unbelievable what these kids had to deal with, and like just the torment in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I go? Who loves me? My dad is a psychopath according to my mom, but my mom's fucking nuts.
Right.
What do you do? And there's just no boundaries.
I know. I'm just heartbroken for what these kids went through.
It's really sad.
So the kids, of course, began acting out, and they were fighting with each other as a result of their family's instability and all the stress they were under. And of course, they're following the example of their parents.
And I'm sure they just couldn't understand why these kids are just suddenly having issues.
Right.
We just don't get it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they're like, we got to take him to the therapist. We got to do this. They got to get involved in extracurriculars, not changing their own behavior.
And that's what they did. They just threw him in soccer and shit like that. And she was soccer mom.
Yep. So although the family was internally going through all this chaos and just craziness, people around them said that they never knew that there were any issues. Betty and Dan, of course, wanted to always present this image of success and a loving family. So they pretended to get along whenever they were in public. And they always put on this happy family facade whenever people were around.
This is Lester Burnham and family.
Right.
Again.
From
American Beauty. Mm-hmm. But Annette Bening is a great analogy of a description.
Yeah.
Of what Betty's like.
And then just, oh, Lester, just like dismissive whenever anything came out that was slightly weird. I'm sure there was a little bit that people could look back on and be like, oh, that was a little strange.
Absolutely.
But then there was always this kind of dismissive, oh, Lester,
well, she's very
Betty.
sure of herself. She'll take care of it. She always has.
Right. So Dan also became increasingly preoccupied with his own image apart from his family. He was always Dapper Dan, but he kind of started putting a lot more energy into the way he looked. He tried to change his image to fit what he believed that people would expect from a successful attorney. He got contacts, he changed his haircut to appear more youthful, and he had a nose job during this transitional period. He was definitely stepping up his Dapper Dan, for sure.
We're coming into a period of time where greed is good.
Right.
And Gordon Gekko is like a battle cry for a lot of these people. Now, I know he's in, law and everything, but I can't help but wonder, like, that's a pretty pervasive attitude. And he's hand-tailored suits was the phrase. Not just like hand-tailored Dapper Dan.
Yeah.
All of it.
Only the best.
Only the best. And this is also, they're really benefiting from the whole scheme of economics at the time. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't surprise me in any way whatsoever that he's getting nose jobs.
They're the
all of it
quintessential yuppies. I mean, they were just those people.
That's the word.
They were the villains from every 80s movie.
And I feel like
they were Stefan from Pretty in Pink.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, maybe they really weren't, but they were trying to be. Like, they might not have, they didn't have white, what you think of as really yuppie, but the attitude is there.
Right. That was the keeping up with the Joneses for them.
And we call him Dapper Dan. Mm-hmm. That's what we've got going here. How fun for Betty.
Right?
Although she's getting her teeth done.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on
that's
here.
Gotta hurt. Ugh.
So this fake image earned them really frequent mentions and pictures in the society column of the local paper.
Oh, well, then it's working.
Right. It's like, well, achievement unlocked.
Oh, yeah. Definitely something we could put on a resume.
Right. This is useful. So by 1981, Dan was so successful that he relocated his office that was still pretty new to a luxury building downtown, which allowed him to attract more prestigious clients. Again, Betty was brought in to be the interior decorator, but once that project was done, she felt like the house needed an update, so she started renovations. So again, he used her for this project, and then she's got to dive into something else to distract from that feeling of being used.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks because he was like, yo, sorry.
That's how you talk. That's not how he talks.
Hey, Betty, we are getting a new building. It's even better and more fancy. Why don't you decorate it since you're the best? Okay, Dan, I'll be right there. It sounds fantastic, right? And so then she gets there and she does it and it's spectacular. And then, she's done. But if she can parlay this into the house where he lives, then she's absolutely useful at that point.
Right.
So I'm sure he had no problem spending that money to keep her quiet because she's got a project.
Yeah.
And I think that's what these projects are about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It gives her something to do. It kind of distracts her from the fighting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Completely. So Betty suggested a family vacation. So they packed up and they went to Montana. After only a couple days on vacation, Betty and Dan got in a huge fight. So he decided to return back home by himself and left Betty and the kids there. So Betty drove the kids back alone, and the kids recalled that she got more and more angry as the drive went on. It's the dinner thing, but escalated.
You know what I see in my head whenever I heard about this drive home was like, you know, in Greece when they're having the big race at the end and they're showing like they're holding the steering wheel and the tires and you see the face of the guy, you know, and cha-cha.
It's just like
and
a close-up of her white knuckle.
Just, yeah, totally. That's what I was seeing. It was just like, just getting angered, like just fire coming out the tailpipe.
Yeah.
Like Betty is en route.
Yeah, Betty is racing for pinks for sure.
Oh my God. Best dancer at St. Bernadette's. Yeah. All of it. That's what I see.
So crazy. Yeah. And that's, of course, again, terrifying for a kid. Like, yeah, it's easy for us from the outside to look at it.
Forgetting.
But there's kids in the back seat.
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Yep. So when they finally got home, Betty completely went off on Dan about what a failure he was as a husband and, of course, as a father. So Dan, again, he didn't argue. He didn't fight back. He just packed a bag and left to stay in a hotel. And this was the very first time he'd ever done anything like that, and everyone was shocked. He never picked up and left before.
It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure he thought of it.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
But to take this physical action, like I'm leaving, I'm going to this hotel. I mean, she just thinks, oh, he'll come back.
Right.
We got kids.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Go for the night. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
You'll come back and we'll all be here.
So again, she would put the kids in the middle and inappropriately complained about their father. She began to resent her children and lash out at them. And since she didn't have Dan around, she focused all that energy on turning her anger towards them. The kids wanted to defend their father, but they knew, of course, if they did, then there would be hell to pay. And as much shit as Betty talked about him, she was still desperately trying to get Dan to come home. She knew that he had reached basically a breaking point with their relationship, so she started to use the kids as an excuse to get him back.
Which is smart.
Which is like typical. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like so many people do that.
What else? I mean, what else are you going to do? He doesn't want to be home with you.
I mean, the teeth weren't working, so.
Those teeth.
Let's use the kids.
God, that is tragedy.
So Betty told him that the kids were doing horribly without him and needed him to come home. So after 2 weeks, he moved back home. But, of course, things were not peaceful for very long. Dan met a 21-year-old woman named Linda Kolkina at a party and asked her to be his secretary.
What are your qualifications?
Right?
I'm 21. Okay, you're hired.
Here's your new hire paperwork. I'm also going to need your address, your digits.
Have you ever had your own office?
Maybe
because
some nudes.
I'm going to give you the corner.
Right?
Just saying.
So Linda was raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, and was a former Delta Airlines flight attendant who had been recently fired for inappropriate contact with male passengers.
What I envision this as, because I'm like, what exactly does that mean?
Right?
I think it's probably, I hate to say it because it just sounds terrible, but would you need help with your seatbelt, sir?
Right.
Right? Like, can I tighten it for you? Oh, you need help? Like, that's what I imagine it has to be. And it sucks because I really tried to find a lot about Linda. I tried really hard, and you can't get past the Delta Airlines attendant that was fired for possible HJs and blowjobs or something.
Right.
Like,
we really don't know the real situation.
and she's already like kind of a villain here.
Yeah.
And it's just all about like this whore, right? And I don't like that because she's a person. And, you know, she's 21. What the fuck does she know?
Yeah.
She's young. Oh my God, she's young.
Not
Thinking
to
back
be
on
a
21.
dick, but the way dudes are, it's like you could just smile and it's seen as an advance towards you. Like, oh, this girl's flirting with me. It's like she's just fucking polite.
This happens every day.
I don't want to minimalize any sort of, sexual indiscretions. Like, we don't really know what happened. So
No.
maybe it really did. But the other part of me is just like, well, I don't want to unnecessarily villainize her. There were never charges brought up.
Exactly.
There
They
was
just fired
no,
her.
like,
Which is
paper
interesting.
trail about what happened.
I could find
so
nothing.
I don't know. Yeah. So, but it's worth mentioning, like, we don't really know what the circumstances were, but it's also worth saying we don't really know what the circumstances were. So I don't want to take any leaps about it, you know?
No, I don't either.
So soon after hiring her, Dan promoted her to his legal assistant. Even though she lacked any experience, no qualifications, she really didn't have anything to suggest that she deserved this promotion.
She couldn't type.
Right.
Is repeatedly talked about.
Yes. One employee recalls that Linda couldn't even type, but she had her own office and made double what she did.
That's fucked up.
So crazy.
And everyone in there hates her.
Everyone.
And everyone knows.
And she's just walking around like with all these eyes on the back of her head.
Where did you work before here?
Right?
I was a Delta flight attendant, and now I'm
Right.
a legal assistant. And this is just Tuesday.
Right?
So I might be a doctor tomorrow.
Check with me tomorrow.
I could be a pilot.
So rumor has it that other men around Dan were having their own midlife crises around this time, and that they were all kind of bringing their new girlfriends around. And this was the same time that Linda was hired, that everything he was seeing was all these middle-aged men bringing around younger women.
He's seeing an example of what could be. And I think that's making him think like, oh, on the other side of, there's possibility for my life. It doesn't just have to be this.
Right.
There's other options.
Mm-hmm.
Betty's nuts.
Yeah.
It's fucked up.
So Betty became convinced that they were having an affair. Dan, of course, he denied everything and said Betty was crazy for thinking that. But the truth was that at some point he did begin seeing Linda, although we just don't know exactly when it was. At the end of 1983, Betty tried to surprise her husband for his 39th birthday. She got a gift and a bottle of champagne and went to his office to surprise him and take him out for lunch. But when she got there, the secretary said that he had already gone to lunch with Linda. So Betty waited around for him to return, but hours passed and they didn't come back to the office at all.
Burn.
Yeah.
She goes there.
Mm-hmm.
And she probably doesn't go often.
No.
Because if she's, like shocked about this,
Right.
she probably walked in and was just really surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. What a bummer.
Yeah. So when she saw that he wasn't coming back for a long time, she just went home and she started destroying a ton of his things. She gathered his clothes on the front lawn, she poured gas on them and lit them while her children were watching the whole time.
This is definitely not the first outburst these children have watched.
Yeah.
Probably not even the first on the lawn.
So the neighbors called 911, and it was the first time that anyone really on the outside had become aware of the problems that the Broderick family had. When Dan came home, he and Betty fought in the bedroom for hours while the children kind of anxiously listened and waited to hear what was going to happen. And of course, we know they were told they were going to divorce a bunch of times, so they were probably just like, where are we going to sleep after this?
They're just sitting outside listening. But, they are it's like this goes on a lot.
Yeah, so they may have been somewhat desensitized.
Kids might have just tuned out.
But I've heard, accounts of this happening from, I think it was Kim or, one of the older daughters that said they were definitely waiting. They thought this was one of the breaking points where it was like, okay, what are we going to do? Right. Yeah.
If only it had
probably
been.
Definitely kind of a positive thing.
I do love that she burned his clothes on the lawn. It's very Angela Bassett.
I was going to say, yeah.
Snap your finger and walk away from that shit. But you can't do it in your yard when the kids are there. Like, fuck.
Yeah. I'm singing like Whitney Houston in my head.
Oh, God, that's a great movie.
So Dan came out and reassured the kids that everything was okay, and he basically just sent them to bed. The following morning, both Betty and Dan acted like nothing happened, and they continued to do so for months to come. They never acknowledged the incident.
This is the cycle.
Yes, absolutely. When people asked Dan why his wife had such an extreme reaction, Dan just dismissively said, "That's Betty."
It's always been, "That's Betty."
Right. And he's used to it on the inside, I'm sure. But to people on the outside, this is a shock.
Her state of mind is usually like frenetic energy.
Yeah.
So I'm sure to a lot of people, they're like, what the fuck is her deal? That's just Betty. Betty's just like that.
Right.
Is she this? Is she
She's
that?
a fiery lady.
She's a firecracker. She's
Right?
bubbly. People say these things to you. And it's like, no, I'm just like that.
You mean people say these things to you?
All day long. Where do you get all this energy? I don't know. I don't know.
It's just me.
It's just level 100 all the time. And I get it. I feel this with Betty. And like when you're, it's 0 to 100 real quick.
Right.
I see it. I get it. That's just Betty.
That's just Courtney.
Every time.
Even though it was shocking to outsiders, the kids were really, affected by this incident for the first time. Like everybody else, it seemed like a big deal. And the kids began doing poorly in school. They were getting in trouble. And the older girls began drinking and getting high, running away, stuff like that.
It seems like at this point, it's kind of like, Betty's not knowing, but there's got to be some sort of hint that like, okay, something's different, something's up. I went to his birthday lunch, he wasn't there. She's got an idea, and I think the fighting changes here.
Right.
I think it shifts, and now the kids are affected, but it's going to display itself. And these girls are right at that age, that angsty teen girl.
Yeah.
Where like they're going to go to the mall and they're just going to shop the fucking shit, especially when your mom is just spending money like water.
Yeah, this is like, you can see in their behavior that what happened between Dan and Betty was escalating.
It's 1 and 1 is 2.
Yeah. In 1984, the family moved to a new house in an even more upscale neighborhood, while their current house was under construction.
Now, some of the most stressful things you can do in your entire life, it's like births, deaths, moving is up there. Construction is like right in that place. So now you've moved, you're also constructing your old house. You've already got this going on. Your husband's cheating on you. You're pretty sure at this point. He's Dapper Dan. All my kids are fighting with each other. They're getting fucked up. They're drunk all the time. Like,
yeah,
it's going down. Let's do some construction.
Right. Throw that in the mix.
Betty and her projects, right? Keep her busy. But this is where I'm like, back off with the projects. Maybe focus, but priorities. Shift. Nope.
No, it doesn't calm down for her. It's just
wait, is it going to get better, Brianna?
It's totally going to get better from here.
Better? Oh, okay. Cool. Great talk.
So it seemed peaceful for a little while, actually. It calmed down a little bit, but Betty kept insisting that Dan fire Linda. And Dan kept insisting that the affair was a figment of Betty's imagination.
This is the definition of gaslighting?
Yes.
The term?
It was clearly going on, and he just kept saying it wasn't.
And it's noted constantly throughout this, like especially later, that Betty, she's crazy. Oh, Betty, you're crazy. He constantly told her she was crazy. She's making it up. Maybe she believed that at some point. Maybe she's like, you know what? He tells me I'm crazy. I'm fucking nuts. Okay, he's not having an affair. Whatever.
Right.
And then the next day, she like knows it's happening.
Yeah. She knows.
But you're crazy, Betty. I'm not cheating on you.
Right.
What are you talking about? Linda is my legal assistant. Very talented.
Highly qualified.
Very qualified.
Overqualified. Highly recommended.
From Delta.
She's great at serving peanuts.
Oh, yeah.
So even though Dan kept denying it, there were rumors around town, and gossipers would constantly tell Betty whenever they saw Dan and Linda together. So not only does she know it, but she's hearing about it.
Ouch.
Yeah. So when Betty would interrogate Dan, he would continue to deny it, even though there are people constantly telling her they were out at dinner, they went and got drinks over and over again. And he kept saying it wasn't happening.
You know, she's running into her friends, the socialite ladies, the ladies who lunch.
That are whispering behind her back.
Absolutely.
She can hear
when
it.
she walks in, the room gets quiet. Oh, what were we talking about? Nothing.
Right. Definitely not Linda.
Definitely not you and your husband.
So Betty would often tell the kids about all the awful things their father was up to and saying terrible things about both Dan and Linda now. Betty really couldn't keep her resentment in check. And again, she would say really inappropriate things to her children about their father. So we're going to play a voicemail. And in this voicemail, you hear her son Danny, who's very young, saying that Dan and Betty fight too much. And Betty's telling her son Danny that his father was fucking the secretary.
You both are separated, Mom. And he likes somebody else now. He doesn't like you anymore. And I mean, if you gotta stop saying the bad words. Why doesn't he like me anymore? Because he's sick of you. Because you guys get in all these fights. Why do we get fights? I don't know. This is secretary. Even before that, you got in fights, Mom. I don't think so, Danny. See, you didn't know he was the secretary for the last 2 years we were married. We want to live with you, but you're just making it harder for all of us that wants to live over there. If you stop saying bad words, everybody will be happier. At least I know I will.
11 years old.
It's
He's
important
11.
to remember he's only 11.
He's 11.
Yeah. So on that message, you can hear Danny pleading with his mom to stop using bad words and basically trying to get her behavior in check. And basically says that everyone will be happier if she stops, you know? Especially he focuses on the bad words. But I mean, in general, I think that's probably the easiest thing for him to address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, bad words. I can't say them, Mom.
Yeah.
Why can you? You're my mom.
I know.
And also, she is just not listening.
No, not at all.
In any way, she doesn't hear him, but she doesn't hear him
Right.
at all.
No. And it's the epitome of just not active listening. She's not taking in anything that he has to say, even though this is her child.
She is not quick to listen. She's waiting to speak.
Yes.
The whole time.
Absolutely.
This
She
poor
wants to get her
kid.
points in.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And he's so smart.
Yeah.
And he knows what's going on. And, Mom, we've been fighting for a long time.
Right.
I mean,
Just calm down.
chill.
Yep.
We're at the beach. This is beach time.
Right?
Who the fuck is this crazy at the beach?
Chill out, lady. Hang 10.
Shit.
So to smooth things over, Dan took Betty on a vacation. And by all accounts, they had a really wonderful romantic trip. But of course, as soon as they returned home, the fighting resumed as though nothing happened.
This was the trip where they had he romanticized everything and had flowers and leis, all of it, everything's there. And then everything's going perfectly. And I think he's showing her what life could be like. Betty, I'll give you vacations and clothes in the world, but I got this chick on the side.
Right.
And I think you should be cool with it because look at where we are and what I'm doing for you.
We could have a wonderful life together, but just chill out and accept Linda.
And in the end of the trip, she uses this phrase that is his, volcanic explosion hates to hear this phrase, which is, so is your midlife crisis over yet? Meaning, is Linda done? Are we together now? We've gone on this trip. You love me. Let's do it. And I think he's just like, oh shit, that means she's not down for this.
Right.
And that's probably when he's like, all right, so I got to go.
Right. Yeah. That might be his breaking point, that he can't have it all.
No.
Yeah.
Not with Betty.
So by November 1984, Betty was back to working herself into a frenzy anytime Dan didn't live up to her expectations.
And she's not going to lower her expectations.
No.
He's Dapper Dan.
Right. So she planned an elaborate birthday for him because both of their birthdays were in November. So they always did this big party. But then Dan was late, and by the time he arrived, Betty had attempted suicide by taking pills and slitting her wrists.
Jeez.
In December, Betty began asking Dan for an emerald ring for Christmas. When she opened the ring box on Christmas morning, she completely flipped out because he'd gotten her an emerald ring, but not the exact one that she wanted.
I'm curious about what exactly Linda got for Christmas that year.
Yeah.
Because,
and she probably was too.
Right? Because I would bet she may have gotten that ring and then, oh yeah, Betty wanted something too. What was it again?
Right.
Something like this. Just give her that one. It's fine.
In mid-1985, Betty began demanding that Dan admit that he was seeing Linda. When he kept dismissing her, she threw hair gel at him, and that was it for Dan. It seems like a small thing, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. He moved out of the new family home and back into their former home that was currently under construction.
Rather live in a construction site.
Exactly.
Jeez.
So he finally filed for separation, and soon after, he admitted that he was indeed seeing Linda. He then served Betty with divorce papers at a restaurant while she was out to lunch with her socialite friends. She became convinced that he was trying to humiliate her. And this was one of those things where she was like, you did this publicly in front of my friends.
I was so excited to say this. I'm like, I really think this is fucked up.
Yeah. Oh, it
because
is.
her whole world is being Mrs. Dan Broderick. And then, okay, so we'll take that away. But doing it in public and thinking maybe, probably part of him was like, she'll be calm.
Right.
She'll keep it cool, which that's not Betty's style.
No.
So what the fuck are you thinking? But to do it in front of her friends is very hurtful to me. And it's like, that's a fucked up mental game Dan plays with Betty.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he was definitely trying to get his jabs in, you know, and he knew that this would be something that affected her, that the most important thing she had was her reputation and being Mrs. Dan Broderick, you know?
That's it.
So this was a huge deal for her. It was, her world was crumbling and in front of everybody. Betty decided to take the kids on a spring break vacation. And of course, the children hoped it would be really peaceful without both of their parents together. When they got home, Kim asked if she could drive her friend home, and Betty lashed out at her. She called Kim all sorts of names and said that Kim was self-centered like her father. Betty had Kim bring her vacation luggage and proceeded to drive her over to the house where Dan was staying. Betty just pulled the car up and told Kim to get out and drove away without even checking to see if Dan was home. And of course, he wasn't there. And by the time he got home, Kim was alone and just crying in front of the house.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah.
And as far as we know, she's kept the kids at this point. This is the first time that she's really just like, I've had it with you. Go see your father.
Right.
This is the first time. And so, yeah, this is probably like earth-shattering to Kim. Oh, my God. My mom just pitched me out the window.
Right.
Left me on
just
the lawn.
tuck and roll and pushed her.
Yeah. See ya. Have your dad feed you. I mean, what the fuck?
So the next day, Dan and Kim went out for dinner. And when they arrived home, 8-year-old Danny was in front of the house crying. Betty had dropped him off because she was mad that he got in a fight with his little brother.
Side note, it makes me wonder if someone's in a cult somewhere having kids, dropping them off on your porch,
right?
Like Joseph Fritzl's fucking daughter that's supposed to be in a cult, leaving babies on the porch, and we just accept that that's what's going on. We just take them in. I mean, it's not funny.
No, but people just leaving their kids like that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a huge sign that something is extremely fucked up.
Just no connection.
Nope, nothing. So heartless.
And everyone said before it really amped up, like the gaslighting and the Linda, really, before that all amped up, she was such a good mother. She's such a good mother. That's
She's
like
so fun.
everybody. Yeah,
she does a bunch of
everybody's
stuff with
kids
them.
love her.
Yes.
So now she's just.
But then we see she has no attachment.
None. And when that stopped,
right?
It's like her whole world started to revolve around getting Dan back, and at any cost, including like the kid's mental state.
Absolutely
scary.
So one by one, Betty found excuses to drop all of the kids off at his house. And Betty thought that with all the kids at his home, Dan would see how much he really needed Betty. And then this Linda phase would just pass, that he would see her value and come back.
Because that's how it always works in these adulterous relationships.
Right.
Isn't that the way? He always comes back to the wife after he's found a younger model.
Right.
Oh, Betty.
She's going to be the one that breaks that sort of cycle. Yeah.
Oh, she's not breaking the cycle.
Nope. Dan just hired a housekeeper. He hired a nanny and had no problem providing a stable home for the kids. He just hired some help and did it on his own. So when it turned out that Dan wasn't begging for Betty's help, she forced her way back into their lives. She'd complained for so long about how she had to do everything for the kids while Dan did nothing. But once she didn't have the kids and had all this free time, she really didn't know what to do with it. You know, she needed the kids. She needed those projects and the renovations and everything.
She doesn't have a party to plan.
Right.
Or a project or a room to decorate. Oh, she's just sitting by herself thinking.
And stewing in it.
Thinking about how wronged she's been. She's
Right.
been used and abused and thrown away.
You had brought up before that whole thing of her probably just watching Dallas and all these soap operas, drinking wine, and just like letting the whole wound fester.
From
And just
84 to 89, the number one shows were Dynasty and Dallas, which is just fashion, clothes, cars, high living. And for a while, she lived it. And I imagine her coming home, putting the kids wherever the hell the kids belong, and then sitting on the couch, drinking some alcoholic beverage, dressed in some Bob Mackie. Right? Sitting there just like, oh, I relate to these people.
Yeah.
And he's taking it away from me. And look at what life I had and could live, and pointing at the television and screaming at it. That's what I do too. And I just imagine that because I just go weird places with it. But it might be true.
Yeah.
There were only like the big three networks. Shit. There's nothing else to watch. It's possible. Anyway, she's losing that lifestyle.
Right.
And she felt she had it. And she's going to do everything she can to get her man back.
And also just all the drama that she was probably indulging in, not only with TV, but in the socialite circle. Like
High drama environment, for
so
sure.
high drama, so high stakes.
She creates this drama too. Like she puts herself in this position for the drama to be around, and then she'll just eat it up.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably one of her addictions, shopping and drama.
Histrionics.
Yeah. So, of course, Betty had a teaching credential. She had a real estate license. She was really skilled at interior design. But instead of filling her time with work and hobbies, she poured all her energy into causing problems for Dan. She was a smart woman. She was driven. She could have done so many things. But instead, she became completely obsessed with getting revenge.
Obsessed. Vendetta
Yes.
is kind of accurate here.
Yeah.
Just blood feud. It switched. Boom. Now I hate him. Fuck him.
Yep.
But I want him to come back to me, you guys. Like, Betty, get it together.
Yeah. And I think, you know what? We're like halfway through all of this. So I think this might be a good point to stop part 1, and then we'll come back in a second for part 2. I'm going to release it on the same day, so you don't have to wait. It's going to be just back to back, but it's too much for one episode. So
It's a lot.
It really is a lot. But as you can see, I mean, there's so much that happened, and we're just kind of getting to the point where things are going to go
This is when it just
crazy.
goes south.
Yeah.
This is the amp up.
Right. So once the kids are dropped off, I think this is kind of a point where things really
You know what
escalate.
this is? This is when Betty loses the control of the situation.
Yes, absolutely.
This is it. This is the moment.
Yep. So this is the end of part 1, I think. And then we'll be back, you know, right away for part 2.
See you in a sec.
Bye.
Finding the right pros for home projects can be tough and spark a lot of questions like, how do I find a pro who can help? Will they do a good job? Will I get a fair price? That's where Home Advisor can help. From leaky faucets to major remodels, Home Advisor connects you to the right pro for the job in seconds and even helps you get a fair price. Read reviews, check project cost guides, and book appointments. Go to homeadvisor.com or download the free Home Advisor app to start your next project.
And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle.
It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
and learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.